The research vessel Horizon's Edge floated in the darkness of deep space, far from any planet or star system. It was a massive ship, built specifically for one purpose: to study the most dangerous creatures found across the galaxy. Inside its thick metal walls, behind layers of security and reinforced barriers, scientists worked day and night examining aliens that would give most people nightmares. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the main corridor, checking the daily reports on his datapad. He was a tall man in his early 40s with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He had been running this ship for 5 years now, and he took his job seriously. 60 people lived and worked on this vessel, and their safety was his responsibility. Every single day he worried about what they kept locked up in the containment levels below. The cafeteria was half full when Jake entered. Scientists sat at tables talking quietly about their research. Security officers ate quickly before their next shift. Everyone on this ship knew the risks. They had signed up for this mission knowing they might not come home. The pay was excellent, but money meant nothing if you were dead. Jake grabbed a cup of coffee and sat down across from Dr. Lisa Bennett. She was the lead xenobiologist on the ship, a woman in her 30s with red hair always tied back in a ponytail. Dark circles under her eyes showed she had been working too many hours again. She barely looked up from the tablet she was reading. "You need to sleep," Jake said. Lisa shook her head without taking her eyes off the screen. "I'm fine. Just going over the latest behavioral data. On Subject Zero?" "Always Subject Zero." She finally looked up at him.
"Jake, I'm telling you, this creature is different from anything we've ever seen."
"It's not just intelligent. It's strategic. It thinks ahead. It plans." Jake had heard this before. Lisa had been studying Subject Zero for 2 years now, ever since the creature was brought aboard. She was fascinated by it, maybe too fascinated. "It's locked up behind the strongest containment field we have. 3 backup systems, armed guards 24 hours a day." "I know," Lisa said, but she didn't sound convinced. "But it watches us, Jake. Every day it studies the guards. It counts their steps. It listens to every sound in the ship. I think it's mapping the entire vessel just from what it can hear." Jake wanted to tell her she was being paranoid, but he couldn't. He had seen Subject Zero himself, and the memory still gave him chills. The creature stood 12 feet tall, covered in black armor-like skin that seemed to absorb light. It had 6 limbs, 4 that could work as arms or legs, and 2 that ended in blade-like appendages sharp enough to cut through steel. Its head was angular with multiple eyes that could see in different directions at once. Most terrifying of all was the intelligence behind those eyes. When Subject Zero looked at you, you knew it was thinking, planning, judging. The creature came from somewhere in the Andromeda sector, from a planet humans had only visited once. The exploration team that found it had all died except for 2 people. Those survivors described a world where Subject Zero's species were the ultimate predators. Nothing else on that planet could stand against them. They hunted in packs, used tools, and communicated with complex sounds. The military had sent a task force to capture one for study. 27 soldiers died in that mission. The creature they brought back had killed most of them, before they managed to trap it with electromagnetic nets. Even drugged and restrained, it had killed 3 more people during transport to the Horizon's Edge. Ryan Porter, the security chief, joined them at the table. He was a former Marine, built like a wall with a scar running down his left cheek. "Talking about our favorite guest again?" "Lisa thinks it's planning something," Jake said. Ryan nodded slowly. "I think she's right. My team has noticed changes. It's testing the containment field more often. Little taps like it's checking for weak spots, and it started doing something new. It faces the east wall of its cell during specific hours." "The east wall?" Jake frowned. "What's in that direction?" "The docking bay," Ryan said quietly. "Where the escape pods are." The 3 of them sat in silence for a moment. Around them, other crew members talked and laughed, unaware of the conversation happening at their table. Jake knew he should report this to headquarters, but what would he say? That they had a feeling? That the creature seemed to be planning something? They would tell him he was being paranoid. Subject Zero had been locked up for 2 years without incident. "Double the guards," Jake finally said, "and run a full diagnostic on the containment systems. All 3 backup systems, too." Ryan nodded. "I'll do it today." Lisa stood up, taking her tablet with her. "I'm going down to observation. Maybe I can figure out what it's thinking." "Be careful," Jake said, but she was already walking away. The observation room for Subject Zero was small, barely big enough for 3 people. One wall was entirely made of reinforced glass thick enough to stop a missile. On the other side of that glass was the containment cell, a large space with white walls and bright lights. In the center of that space, Subject Zero sat motionless, its black form stark against the white background. Lisa entered the room and sat in the chair facing the glass. She had spent hundreds of hours in this chair, watching, taking notes, trying to understand. The creature didn't move when she arrived. It never did. It just sat there still as a statue, but she knew it was aware of her. It was always aware of everything. She opened her tablet and began reviewing her notes from the past week. Subject Zero's behavior had definitely changed. It was more alert, more focused. 2 months ago, it would sometimes sleep for hours. Now it barely slept at all. It sat and listened, its head tilting slightly at every sound that echoed through the ship. "What are you waiting for?" Lisa whispered to the glass. As if in answer, Subject Zero's head turned. Multiple eyes focused on her through the barrier. Lisa felt her heart rate increase. Even after 2 years, making eye contact with this creature was terrifying. It was like looking at death itself, cold and patient. The creature stood slowly, unfolding its limbs with liquid grace. It walked toward the glass, each step silent despite its massive size. When it reached the barrier, it stood there looking down at Lisa. They were only a few feet apart, separated by the glass and the invisible containment field. Lisa forced herself to stay calm. She had done this before. The creature often came to the glass, studying her just as she studied it. She took out a device that could play sounds and pressed a button. A series of tones filled the observation room, the same tones she used every day. It was her way of saying hello. Subject Zero tilted its head, listening. Then it opened its mouth and made a sound. A complex series of clicks and low rumbles. Lisa had heard this sound before. She thought it might be the creature's version of hello, but she couldn't be sure. Understanding this alien language was nearly impossible. She played another series of tones, this time a pattern that meant food. Subject Zero responded immediately, making a different sound. Lisa smiled and typed notes on her tablet. This was progress. Small, careful progress, but progress nonetheless. They continued like this for an hour, Lisa playing sounds and Subject Zero responding. She was so focused on her work that she didn't notice the time. She didn't notice when the lights flickered slightly. She didn't notice the small change in the hum of the ship's engines, but Subject Zero noticed. Its posture changed, became more alert. Its eyes moved, looking at something Lisa couldn't see. The creature suddenly moved away from the glass and returned to the center of its cell. It sat down again, perfectly still, but Lisa could sense the change. Something was different. She checked her tablet, looking at the ship's systems. Everything showed normal. Life support was running smoothly. Power was steady. The containment field was at full strength. Nothing seemed wrong, but the feeling in her gut said otherwise. Lisa stood up and left the observation room. In the corridor outside, 2 security guards stood at their posts. They looked bored, like always. "Has anything unusual happened?" she asked them. One guard shook his head. "All quiet, Doctor. Just another normal day." But as Lisa walked back toward her quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Subject Zero knew it. She could see it in the way the creature had moved, the sudden tension in its posture. Whatever it was, it would happen soon. That night, Jake lay in his bed, unable to sleep. The ship was quiet around him, just the normal sounds of life support and engines. Outside his window, stars moved slowly past as the horizon's edge continued its patrol route. In 12 hours, they would make their regular jump to the next sector. It was a routine they had done hundreds of times. He thought about what Lisa and Ryan had said, about Subject Zero testing the barriers, about the creature facing toward the escape pods. Part of him wanted to believe it meant nothing. Humans had a habit of seeing patterns where none existed, of imagining threats that weren't real. But another part of him, the part that had kept him alive through 20 years in space, told him to listen to his instincts. Something was wrong. He just didn't know what yet. Jake got out of bed and put on his uniform. Sleep could wait. He would go down to the containment level himself, check on everything personally. Maybe seeing Subject Zero locked safely in its cell would help him relax. The alarm cut through the silence of the ship like a knife. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors, spinning in circles that made shadows dance on the walls. Jake ran as fast as he could toward the containment level. his heart pounding in his chest. Other crew members emerged from their rooms, confused and frightened, asking what was happening. Jake didn't stop to answer them. His radio crackled to life. Ryan's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Captain, we have a breach. Subject 0 is out of containment. Repeat, Subject 0 is out. How?" Jake demanded, still running. The containment field had 3 backup systems. "The jump," Ryan said. "We started the jump sequence early. There was some kind of solar radiation interference. Power fluctuated for maybe 90 seconds. The containment field dropped to 60%. That should still hold it. It wasn't enough." Ryan's voice was grim. "It was testing those barriers for months, Captain. It knew exactly where the weak point was. The second the field dropped, it hit that spot with everything it had. Broke through before the backups could fully engage." Jake reached the main security station and burst through the door. Ryan was there with 4 other security officers, all watching monitors that showed different parts of the ship. On one screen, Jake could see the empty containment cell. The reinforced glass wall was shattered. Pieces of it lay scattered across the floor like broken ice. "Where is it now?" Jake asked. Ryan pointed to another monitor. "Deck 7, Section C. It took out Kyle Sanders 3 minutes ago. He managed to hit the alarm before—" Ryan didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. On the screen, Jake could see Kyle's body lying in the corridor. The young security officer had been 24 years old. He had a wife back on Earth, a baby daughter he had never met. Now he never would. "Lock down all sections," Jake ordered. "Get everyone into the safe rooms." "How many people are in the affected areas?" One of the officers checked his console. 15 people on Deck 7, 20 more on Deck 6. Most of them are trying to reach the safe rooms now. Jake watched the monitors, trying to think. Subject 0 was moving through the ship with purpose, not randomly. It had a destination in mind. Where is it heading? Ryan had already figured it out. The docking bay. It wants off this ship. Close the bay doors. Seal everything. Already done, sir. But those doors won't hold it forever. Jake knew Ryan was right. They had seen what Subject 0 could do. Steel and electronics meant nothing to a creature that strong, that determined. "We need to slow it down. Buy time for people to get to safety." "I'm sending teams to intercept," Ryan said. But his face showed he didn't think it would work. On the monitors, Jake watched as a security team of 4 officers moved into position in a corridor on Deck 6. They had heavy weapons, the kind designed to stop armored vehicles. The team leader was speaking into his radio, coordinating with other teams. They were brave, professional, well-trained. It didn't matter. Subject 0 appeared at the end of the corridor so suddenly it seemed to materialize from nowhere. The creature must have been using the ventilation system to move between decks. It dropped from a ceiling vent, landing in a crouch between the security team and their escape route. The officers opened fire immediately. Plasma bolts lit up the corridor, hitting Subject 0 again and again. The creature's black armor absorbed most of the damage. Small scorch marks appearing, but nothing that slowed it down. Subject 0 moved forward, incredibly fast for something so large. Its blade-like appendages flashed in the red emergency lighting. Jake looked away from the monitor. He had seen enough death in his life. He didn't need to watch 4 more people die. But he could hear their screams through the radio before the signal went dead. "God help us," one of the officers whispered. Lisa's voice came through Jake's radio. "Captain, I'm in the research lab on Deck 4. I have 3 other people with me. We're sealed in, but Subject 0 could break through if it wants to." "Stay where you are," Jake told her. "Don't make any noise. It might pass by if it doesn't know you're there." "Jake, listen to me. This creature is intelligent. It's not just running wild. It has a plan. Everything it's doing is calculated." "I know," Jake said. "It's heading for the docking bay." "Then let it go," Lisa said urgently. "Open the bay doors. Give it an escape pod. Let it leave." Jake wanted to agree with her. Part of him wanted nothing more than to open those doors and let this nightmare leave his ship. But he couldn't. "Lisa, if that thing gets loose in civilized space, it could kill thousands of people before anyone stops it. Maybe more. I can't let that happen. Then we're all going to die," Lisa said quietly. She might be right, Jake thought. He looked at Ryan. "What are our options?" Ryan pulled up a schematic of the ship on his screen. "We could vent the sections it's in. Open them to space. It might survive vacuum for a while, but not forever. That would kill anyone else in those sections." "I know." Ryan's face was hard, but it might be our only choice. Before Jake could respond, the lights went out. Emergency backup kicked in a second later, but the normal white lights were replaced by dim red ones. Someone had cut the main power to this section of the ship. "It's learning our systems," Ryan said with disbelief in his voice. "It's shutting down power to split our teams apart." Jake checked his datapad, looking at the ship's layout. Subject Zero was still moving toward the docking bay, but now it was taking a more complex route, one that avoided the largest concentrations of security personnel. It was outmaneuvering them. "Reroute teams 3 and 5, Jake ordered. "Have them set up at the main entrance to the docking bay. If we can't stop it in the corridors, we make our stand there." Ryan gave the orders, but Jake could see the doubt in his eyes. They both knew this was a desperate move. Subject Zero had already killed 9 people, maybe more. What chance did they have of stopping it? On one monitor, Jake watched as Subject Zero entered a large open space that served as a common area for crew relaxation. 3 scientists were there, trying to reach a safe room on the other side. The creature saw them immediately. One of the scientists, a young man named Peter, pushed his 2 companions toward the safe room while he ran in the opposite direction, trying to draw the creature's attention. It worked. Subject Zero changed direction, following Peter instead. The young scientist ran for his life, his footsteps echoing in the large space. He almost made it to a side corridor when Subject Zero caught him. The creature was impossibly fast, covering the distance in seconds. Peter's scream was brief, but his sacrifice had worked. His 2 companions reached the safe room and sealed the door. They were alive because Peter had been brave enough to give his life for theirs. Jake made a mental note to make sure Peter's family knew what their son had done, how many lives he had saved. The creature continued toward the docking bay. It passed by the research lab where Lisa was hiding. Jake held his breath, watching the monitor. Subject Zero paused outside the lab door for a moment, its head tilting as if listening. Then it moved on. Lisa had been right to stay quiet. "Teams in position at the docking bay," Ryan reported. 8 officers, heavy weapons, portable shield generators. "It's the best we can do," Jake nodded. "Tell them to fire everything they have. Don't stop shooting until that thing is dead, or they are." The wait was terrible. They watched on the monitors as Subject Zero moved through the corridors, getting closer to the docking bay with each passing minute. The creature moved with confidence now, no longer cautious. It knew where it was going, and nothing was going to stop it. Subject Zero reached the final corridor leading to the docking bay. The security team was waiting, positioned behind portable shields with their weapons aimed at the entrance. The team leader, a woman named Helen Grant, spoke calmly into her radio. "We see it, Captain." "Engaging now." The corridor erupted with weapons fire. Plasma bolts, bullets, even a small rocket launcher, all firing at once. The noise was deafening even through the monitors. Subject Zero disappeared in a cloud of smoke and fire. For a moment, Jake dared to hope. Then the creature emerged from the smoke, barely slowed. Its armor was scorched, pieces of it cracked and damaged, but it was still moving. One of its blade appendages was broken, hanging uselessly, but the other was intact and ready. Subject Zero charged the security team. Helen and her people kept firing, refusing to run even when the creature was almost on top of them. Their courage was incredible. It was also not enough. Subject Zero tore through their defenses like they were paper. The shields collapsed under its assault. The weapons fire stopped one by one as the creature moved among them. Jake forced himself to watch. These were his people, and they were dying because of his orders. The least he could do was witness their sacrifice. When it was over, Helen Grant and her entire team were dead. All 8 of them. The docking bay entrance was open, and nothing stood between Subject Zero and freedom. The creature walked into the docking bay, its movements slower now. It was injured more than Jake had realized. Dark fluid leaked from cracks in its armor, leaving a trail behind it. One of its legs dragged slightly, but it was still moving, still determined to escape. Subject Zero reached the control panel for the escape pods. For a moment, Jake thought it would just tear the panel apart in frustration. Danny Cooper had been alone in his shuttle for 3 days, and he was ready to see other people again. The repair job on the satellite relay had taken longer than expected, but he had finally fixed the problem. Now he was heading back to the nearest station, looking forward to a hot meal and a real bed instead of the cramped sleeping pod in his shuttle. He was 26 years old, average height, with brown hair that was getting too long and needed a cut. His hands were permanently stained with grease and engine oil, the mark of someone who worked with machines for a living. Danny had never been the smartest guy in school, never been the strongest or the most talented. But he was good with his hands, good at fixing things, and that skill had gotten him a decent job working maintenance contracts in deep space. The work was lonely, but Danny didn't mind. He had always been more comfortable with machines than with people. Engines made sense to him. They followed rules, did what they were supposed to do. People were complicated, unpredictable. Out here in space, with just his shuttle and his tools, life was simple. The distress signal came through while he was still 2 hours away from the station. Danny almost ignored it. Distress calls were usually handled by military vessels or professional rescue teams, not maintenance contractors and small shuttles. But something made him check the details. The signal was coming from the Horizon's Edge, a research vessel. Danny had done some work on that ship 6 months ago, replacing a faulty cooling system. He remembered the crew had been friendly, especially one of the scientists, Lisa something. She had brought him coffee while he worked and asked him questions about his life. Actually seemed interested in the answers. The distress message was broken, full of static, but Danny could make out a few words. Containment breach, casualties, need assistance. The transmission cut out after that, replaced by harsh static. Danny checked his fuel levels and navigation. He was closer to the Horizon's Edge than the station was. If people were hurt and needed help, he could get there faster than anyone else. He thought about those friendly crew members, about Lisa with her kind smile, and he made his decision. He changed course and pushed his shuttle's engines to maximum speed. The trip took an hour and 40 minutes. Danny tried multiple times to contact the Horizon's Edge, but something was wrong with their communication system. He got nothing back except automated emergency beacons. That worried him more than anything. If they couldn't even respond to hail, something was very wrong. When the Horizon's Edge finally appeared in his view, Danny felt his stomach drop. The ship looked mostly intact from the outside, but all the lights were wrong. Instead of the normal white running lights, everything was red. Emergency lighting. Some sections of the ship were completely dark. As he got closer, he could see that one of the docking bay doors was open, hanging loose like a broken jaw. Danny brought his shuttle in slowly, carefully, ready to back away if he saw any immediate danger. The docking bay was empty except for debris floating in the zero gravity. Pieces of metal, broken equipment, and dark stains on the walls that Danny tried not to think about. He docked his shuttle as gently as he could and put on his suit, checking twice to make sure the seals were good. The airlock cycled slowly, and Danny stepped into the Horizon's Edge. The gravity was working in this section at least, but the air smelled wrong. Smoke and something else, something metallic and sharp that made Danny's nose wrinkle. Blood, he realized. The air smelled like blood. He found the first body 50 feet from the airlock. A security officer, torn apart so badly that Danny turned away and had to force himself not to vomit inside his helmet. He had never seen anything like this. The violence was extreme, almost artistic in its brutality. Whatever had done this was incredibly strong and had no mercy. Danny activated his radio, trying again to contact anyone on the ship. "This is Danny Cooper from the maintenance shuttle. Is anyone alive? Please respond." Only static answered him. He moved through the corridors slowly, his work light cutting through the red emergency lighting. More bodies. Some were security personnel, their weapons still in their hands. Others were scientists in white coats. All of them were dead. Danny counted 12 bodies in the first 3 corridors. How many more were there? His training told him to leave immediately, to get back to his shuttle and call for military help. But his conscience wouldn't let him. There might be survivors, people hiding, people who needed help. He had to check. He had to try. Danny found blood trails leading through the ship, like something large had been wounded and was bleeding as it moved. He followed the trail, not because he wanted to find whatever had made it, but because it led toward the center of the ship, where more people might be alive. The trail ended at a sealed door marked Medical Bay. Danny could hear something on the other side, a thumping sound like someone hitting the door from inside. He checked the control panel. The door was locked from the inside. Someone was alive in there, trying to get out or trying to signal for help. "Hello?" Danny called through the door. "My name is Danny Cooper. I'm here to help." "Can you hear me?" The thumping stopped. A voice came through the door, female, tense with fear. "Are you alone?" "Yes, just me. I got your distress signal. There was a pause, then a different voice, male this time. How do we know you're human? That thing might be able to mimic voices. Danny understood their fear. I don't know how to prove it through a door, but I'm wearing a maintenance suit, orange and gray, contractor badge number 7734. I work for Stellar Repair Services. I fixed your cooling system 6 months ago. Another pause, longer this time. Then the door unlocked and slid open just a crack. An eye peered through, examining Danny carefully. Then the door opened fully and 3 people stood there. Danny recognized Lisa immediately. She looked terrible, her hair wild, her face pale, but she was alive. With her were 2 men, one in a security uniform and one in a captain's uniform. Danny, Lisa said, and her voice cracked with relief. Thank God, we thought everyone was dead. What happened here? Danny asked, stepping into the medical bay. The room was barricaded with furniture and equipment, like they had been preparing for a siege. The man in the captain's uniform stepped forward. I'm Jake Morrison, captain of this vessel. We had a containment breach. A highly dangerous alien specimen escaped and killed most of my crew. How many dead? Danny asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. At least 40, Jake said quietly. Maybe more. We lost contact with entire sections of the ship. Ryan, the security chief, was checking weapons. The creature was heading for the escape pods, but it stopped when your shuttle arrived. It's still on the ship somewhere. Danny felt cold fear settle in his stomach. Where? We don't know. It disappeared into the shadows of the docking bay. It might still be there. It might be anywhere. Lisa put her hand on Danny's arm. You need to leave. Get back to your shuttle and go. Call for help, but don't stay here. Danny looked at the 3 survivors. They were exhausted, terrified, barely holding it together. If he left them here alone and something happened, he would never forgive himself. I'm not leaving without you. All of you. We'll go together to my shuttle. There's only room for 1 in a maintenance shuttle, Jake said. 2 if we're cramped. 3 if we don't mind being really uncomfortable. 4 is impossible, but we can try. Ryan shook his head. The creature is between us and the docking bay. We'd never make it. Then we find another way, Danny said. He was surprised by his own determination. Usually he avoided danger, avoided conflict. But something about this situation brought out a stubbornness he didn't know he had. This ship has emergency escape pods, right? In other sections? Jake nodded slowly. Yes, but we'd have to go through multiple decks to reach them. The creature could be anywhere. Then we move carefully. We move quietly. We survive. Danny started looking around the medical bay. What weapons do you have? Ryan showed him. 2 plasma pistols almost out of charge. 1 rifle with a cracked stock. A medical laser that might work as a weapon if they got desperate. It wasn't much against a creature that had killed 40 people. They spent 10 minutes planning their route, using the ship's schematic on a portable tablet. The nearest escape pods were 3 decks down. They would have to go through the crew quarters, past the cafeteria and down 2 maintenance shafts. If they were lucky, they could avoid the creature entirely. They moved out in a tight group, Ryan in front with the rifle, Jake in the back with 1 pistol, Lisa in the middle, and Danny beside her with the other pistol. The weapon felt wrong in Danny's hands. He had fired a gun exactly twice in his life, both times at a training range. He had missed every target. The crew quarters were dark and empty. They moved through room after room, each one a small personal space that someone had made their own. Photos on walls, books on shelves, small trinkets and memories from home. Every room represented someone who was probably dead now. Danny tried not to think about it. They reached the cafeteria without incident. It was a large open space, tables and chairs scattered around, a food preparation area on one side. Lisa had been here just yesterday morning, eating breakfast with her colleagues. Now it felt like a tomb, silent and haunted. Ryan held up his hand, signaling them to stop. He had heard something. The silence in the corridor was complete, except for the sound of Danny's breathing inside his helmet. Every step he took toward Subject Zero felt like walking through deep water, each movement requiring conscious effort against his body's screaming instinct to run. The creature remained sitting, watching him approach with all its alien eyes. This close, Danny could see the intelligence behind those eyes, the awareness. This was not a mindless beast. This was something that thought, that planned, that understood. Danny stopped 5 feet away from the creature. At this distance, he could smell it through his suit's air filters, a strange scent like ozone and copper. The creature's chest rose and fell with breathing, its damaged armor clicking softly with each breath. Dark blood oozed slowly from cracks in its exoskeleton, dripping onto the floor. "You're hurt," Danny said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, too calm for the situation. "You're trying to get home, aren't you? That's all you want, to go home." Subject Zero made a sound, a low rumble that Danny felt in his bones more than heard. It wasn't aggressive, wasn't threatening. It was almost like the creature was responding to him, trying to communicate. Behind Danny, Lisa's voice came through his radio, shaking with fear. "Danny, please. Please get back here. That thing has killed so many people. It will kill you too." But Danny didn't move away. He slowly reached up and released the seals on his helmet. The hiss of air made Subject Zero tense, its body coiling like it might spring forward. Danny's hands shook as he lifted the helmet off his head, exposing himself completely. If the creature wanted to kill him, nothing protected him now. "I'm not going to hurt you," Danny said, speaking directly to Subject Zero without the helmet between them. "And I don't think you want to hurt me either." "Not really?" The creature leaned forward, its head moving closer to Danny. Several of its eyes closed while others stayed open, shifting to look at him from different angles. Danny could see his own reflection in those dark eyes. A small human standing before something that could tear him apart without effort. But he wasn't afraid anymore. Or maybe he was so afraid that he had gone past fear into something else, something that felt almost like peace. Subject Zero opened its mouth, revealing rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing meat. Danny flinched but held his ground. The creature made another sound, different this time, a series of clicks and low tones that varied in pitch. It was trying to talk to him, Danny realized. Not in words he could understand, but in the creature's own language. "I'm sorry," Danny said softly. "I don't understand what you're saying. But I'm listening. I'm here." From the escape pod bay, Ryan's voice was urgent on the radio. "Captain, we need to grab him and go. The creature is distracted. We can get him into the pod." "No," Jake said. And Danny could hear the wonder in the captain's voice. "Wait, just wait. Look at what's happening." What was happening was beyond anything Danny could have imagined. Subject Zero was studying him, yes, but it was more than that. The creature's posture was changing, becoming less tense, less aggressive. Its breathing slowed. The blade-like appendage that wasn't broken lowered to the floor, no longer held in a fighting position. Danny thought about all the people this creature had killed. Kyle Sanders, who had a baby daughter. Helen Grant and her security team. Peter, who had sacrificed himself. 40 people, maybe more, all dead because Subject Zero wanted to be free. The creature had shown no mercy, no hesitation. It had killed everyone who stood in its way. But now, looking into those alien eyes, Danny didn't see a monster. He saw fear. He saw pain. He saw a being that had been trapped and studied for 2 years, poked and tested and kept in a cage far from home. A being that had done what any of them might do in the same situation. Fought for freedom with every ounce of strength it had. "It's not your fault," Danny whispered, and he was surprised to find tears in his eyes. "They shouldn't have taken you. They shouldn't have kept you locked up like that. You just wanted to go home." Subject Zero made a sound that was almost like a sigh, a long exhale that seemed to carry exhaustion and relief. Then the creature did something that made everyone watching hold their breath. It slowly, deliberately began to lower itself. Its 6 limbs folded beneath it, and its massive head came down until it was below Danny's eye level. The creature pressed its head against the floor in front of Danny, holding the position with perfect stillness. Lisa's voice came through the radio, barely a whisper. "It's bowing. The creature is bowing to him." Danny stood frozen, not understanding what he was seeing. This was the most dangerous predator anyone had ever encountered, a creature that had slaughtered its way through a ship full of armed personnel, and it was kneeling before an unarmed maintenance worker who had done nothing except talk to it like it mattered, like it was someone instead of something. Slowly, carefully, Danny reached out his hand. His fingers touched the top of Subject Zero's head, feeling the smooth, warm surface of its armor. The creature didn't move, didn't react violently. It stayed in its bowed position, accepting the touch. "I see you," Danny said quietly. "I see you, and you're not a monster. You're just someone who wants to go home." Minutes passed. Danny stood there with his hand on Subject Zero's head, and the creature stayed bowed before him. It was a moment outside of time, outside of logic, a connection between two beings that should have been enemies but somehow weren't. Danny felt something shift inside himself, some understanding that he couldn't put into words. This creature was alien, yes, terrifying, yes, but it was also alive and aware and capable of something that looked remarkably like respect. Finally, Subject Zero raised its head. The creature looked at Danny one more time, and Danny could have sworn he saw something like gratitude in those alien eyes. Then the creature stood, its movements slow and careful, like it didn't want to startle him. It backed away a few steps, maintaining eye contact, then turned and walked back down the corridor the way it had come. Danny watched it go, his hand still raised where it had been touching the creature's head. His whole body was shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with him. His legs felt weak and he thought he might fall down. Then Lisa was there, running from the escape pod bay, grabbing him and pulling him into a tight hug. She was crying, he realized, her shoulders shaking. "You're insane," she said into his chest. "You're completely insane and you're alive, and I can't believe what I just saw." Jake and Ryan joined them, both men looking at Danny like he had just performed a miracle. "How did you do that?" Jake asked. "How did you make it stop?" "I didn't make it do anything," Danny said, his voice rough. "I just talked to it. I just treated it like it was someone who mattered." Ryan was shaking his head in disbelief. "That thing killed 40 of our people. It showed no mercy, no hesitation." "Why would it bow to you?" Lisa pulled back from Danny, her eyes wide with sudden understanding. "Because Danny didn't see a monster. Everyone else on this ship, we saw Subject Zero as a specimen, a threat, a thing to be studied or destroyed. But Danny saw it as a person, as someone trapped and scared and trying to get home. That can't be all it takes," Ryan said. "There has to be more to it." But Danny knew Lisa was right. He had approached Subject Zero without weapons, without fear of what it could do to him. He had been exhausted, running on empty, too tired to hide his emotions. The creature had somehow sensed that, had recognized something in Danny that it hadn't found in anyone else on the ship. Empathy, understanding, recognition of its personhood. "It has a culture," Lisa said excitedly, her scientific mind already working on the implications. Subject Zero's species must have some kind of social structure, some system of respect or honor. When Danny showed it respect, treated it with dignity, the creature responded according to its own cultural rules. "By kneeling?" Jake asked. "By acknowledging a worthy other," Lisa said. "In its world, maybe that gesture means something specific, a recognition between equals or between beings who see each other truly." Danny looked down the corridor where Subject Zero had disappeared. "It's still on the ship. What do we do now?" Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he activated his command radio, broadcasting to any remaining crew members. "This is Captain Morrison. Stand down all aggressive actions against Subject Zero. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Repeat, stand down, Captain." Ryan looked shocked. "That thing is still loose. And it just had the perfect opportunity to kill all 4 of us," Jake said firmly. "It didn't. Whatever happened here, whatever Danny did, it changed something. I'm not going to restart this violence if there's another way." Lisa was already pulling up ship schematics on her datapad. "We need to give it what it wants. An escape pod, a way home." "The escape pods can't reach its home system," Ryan pointed out. "They're short range only. But they can reach the nearest inhabited planet," Jake said. "And from there, we can arrange transport back to the Andromeda sector. If that's really what it wants." Danny found himself nodding. "It's what it wants. I could see it. The creature is homesick." They made their way carefully back to the docking bay, all 4 of them together. Jake broadcast their location and intentions on all channels, hoping that somehow Subject Zero would understand they were trying to. The first few hours in the escape pod were the longest of Danny's life. He sat pressed against the wall, every muscle tense, watching Subject Zero's every movement. The creature took up most of the space, its large frame folded into what looked like an uncomfortable position. Its multiple eyes would occasionally focus on Danny, then look away, examining the pod's interior with what seemed like curiosity. Danny tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept replaying everything that had happened, all the death he had seen, all the bodies in the corridors. Subject Zero had killed those people. 40 human beings had died so this creature could be free. How was Danny supposed to just sit here and pretend that didn't matter? But every time anger tried to rise in his chest, he looked at the creature's wounds. The cracks in its armor still slowly leaking dark blood. The broken blade limb that hung uselessly. Subject Zero had fought desperately to escape, yes, but it had been fighting for its life, for its freedom. What would Danny have done in the same situation? If aliens had captured him, locked him in a cage, studied him like a lab animal for 2 years, what would he do to get free? Around hour 5, Danny finally spoke. I know you probably can't understand me, but I need to say this. I'm sorry for what they did to you. The humans on that ship, they shouldn't have kept you prisoner. Subject Zero's head turned toward him. The creature made a soft clicking sound, different from the aggressive noises Danny had heard during the chase. It was almost questioning, like the creature was trying to understand. Danny pulled out his data pad, one of the items they had loaded into the pod. The screen showed a star map of local space. He zoomed in on the Andromeda sector, then looked at Subject Zero. Home? He asked, pointing at the screen, then at the creature. Subject Zero leaned forward, studying the screen with intense focus. One of its working limbs reached out slowly, carefully, and touched the screen. The creature's blade-like appendage was surprisingly gentle, tapping a specific region of the Andromeda sector. Then it made a series of sounds, varied and complex. That's your home, Danny said, feeling excitement despite himself. You're telling me where you're from. They spent the next hour like that, with Danny pointing at different things on the screen and Subject Zero responding with sounds or gestures. It was primitive communication, barely more than pantomime, but it was working. Danny learned that Subject Zero's planet had 2 suns, that the creature's species lived in what looked like hive structures, large communities. That Subject Zero had family there, a concept Danny understood when the creature gestured with its limbs in patterns that suggested multiple individuals. You have people waiting for you, Danny said quietly. Family. They must be worried. They must think you're dead. Subject Zero made a sound that was lower, sadder than the others. The creature's posture changed, becoming somehow smaller, more vulnerable. Danny realized he was seeing grief. Subject Zero missed its home, missed its family, had probably given up hope of ever seeing them again. Without thinking, Danny reached out and placed his hand on Subject Zero's limb, the way he might comfort a friend. The creature went very still for a moment, then made a soft rumbling sound that reminded Danny of a cat purring. Not the same, but similar in some way that transcended species. It was a sound of comfort, of acceptance. We'll get you home, Danny promised. I don't know how yet, but we will. Even if I have to pilot a ship to Andromeda myself. Lisa's voice had kept coming through the pod's communication system, updating them on the Horizon's Edge's status. Jake and his surviving crew were repairing the ship enough to limp to Proxima Station. The death toll was final now. 42 people dead, 18 survivors. Lisa's voice was professional when she gave the updates, but Danny could hear the pain underneath. These had been her friends, her colleagues. Some had died horrible deaths. Danny looked at Subject Zero. The people you killed. They had families too. People who loved them, who are waiting for them to come home. But they never will. The creature made a low sound, and Danny saw something in its posture that might have been remorse. Subject Zero had killed out of desperation, out of a drive to be free, but maybe it understood the cost. Maybe it felt the weight of those deaths the same way Danny did. I'm not saying it was your fault, Danny continued, needing to work through his own feelings. They trapped you. They gave you no choice. But those people didn't deserve to die either. Nobody deserves to die like that. Subject Zero was quiet for a long time. Then the creature did something unexpected. It bowed its head again, the same gesture it had made in the corridor. But this time it wasn't bowing to Danny specifically. It was bowing toward empty space, toward the memory of the dead. It was an acknowledgement, maybe even an apology. Danny felt tears in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. For seeing them, for recognizing that they mattered. On the second day in the pod, Danny discovered something remarkable. He had been humming to himself, an old song his mother used to sing when he was a child. Subject Zero's eyes focused on him immediately, and the creature made a series of sounds that matched the rhythm of Danny's humming. Not the same notes, not the same melody, but the same pattern. You can hear music, Danny said with wonder. You understand rhythm. He hummed again, and again Subject Zero matched the pattern with its own sounds. They went back and forth like that for an hour, Danny creating simple rhythms and Subject Zero repeating them in its own way. It was the most basic form of communication, but it was beautiful. 2 species that had never even known the other existed, finding common ground in something as universal as rhythm. Lisa was ecstatic when Danny told her about it. This is incredible. We thought we understood nothing about their communication, but music might be the key. Danny, you're making first contact properly. You're building a bridge. Danny laughed, looking around the cramped pod. If by bridge you mean sitting in a tiny box for 3 days, then yes, I'm an excellent bridge builder. But he knew what Lisa meant. Every hour he spent with Subject Zero, he understood more. Not through words, but through observation, through patience, through willingness to see the creature as an individual. He noticed that Subject Zero would sometimes close most of its eyes when it was relaxed, keeping just 1 or 2 open to monitor the environment. He noticed the creature's breathing changed rhythm when it was thinking hard about something. He noticed that when Subject Zero was happy or content, it would make a soft clicking sound almost too quiet to hear. And Subject Zero was learning about him too. The creature had figured out that Danny needed to sleep, and during those times it stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, giving Danny as much quiet as possible. When Danny ate, Subject Zero watched with clear interest, its head tilting. As it studied how humans consumed food, Danny tried to explain that his body worked differently, that he needed regular meals while Subject Zero seemed able to go much longer without eating. He didn't know if the creature understood, but it seemed to listen. On the 3rd day, they were getting close to Proxima Station. Danny could see it on the navigation screen, a small dot growing larger. His stomach was tight with anxiety. What would happen when they arrived? Would the station authorities try to capture Subject Zero again? Would they see it as a threat? Would everything Danny had worked for fall apart? We need a plan, he said to Subject Zero, though he wasn't sure how much the creature understood. When we get there, people are going to be scared. They're going to want to lock you up again. We can't let that happen. Subject Zero made a questioning sound. Danny pulled up the datapad and opened a document he had been working on. It was a detailed account of everything that had happened, from the creature's capture to its escape, to Danny's encounter with it. He had written it as objectively as possible, including the deaths but also including his observations about Subject Zero's intelligence, its capacity for mercy, its clear desire to simply go home. I'm going to send this to the station before we dock, to news services, to scientific journals, to anyone who will listen. I'm going to tell your story, make sure people understand what really happened. He recorded a video message too, sitting there in the pod with Subject Zero visible in the frame behind him. My name is Danny Cooper, he said to the camera. I'm a maintenance contractor, nobody important. But I'm sitting here with a being that most people would call a monster. I've spent 3 days with Subject Zero, and I'm here to tell you that this creature is not a monster. It's intelligent, it's emotional, it has family it loves and wants to see again. Yes, it killed people on the horizon's edge. But those deaths happened because humans captured it, imprisoned it, gave it no choice but to fight for freedom. This creature deserves to go home. It deserves the chance to be with its family again. And humanity needs to learn from this. We can't just capture and study beings we find interesting. We have to respect them, see them as people, not as specimens. Danny ended the recording and looked at Subject Zero. I hope that helps. I hope people listen. The creature reached out with its working limb and gently touched Danny's arm. It was a gesture of trust, of gratitude. Danny placed his hand over the blade-like appendage, and they sat there together as the escape pod continued its journey to the station. When they were an hour away from docking, Danny sent his document and video to every contact he had and